Without further ado, let me introduce not only the president of the John Birch Society, former Marine, former Holy Cross man, and also former engineer who designed a component used in fighter aircraft, John McManus.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Delight to be here. I'd like to start off with a story. I'll tell you the story about the burglars that were ransacking a home. And they're loading up their bags with the silver and whatever else they could find, and they're doing a heck of a job of it. And all of a sudden they heard a voice, and the voice said, "The Lord is with you." So they stopped and they looked around, and nothing really happened, so continued loading up the bags, right? And again, the voice said, "The Lord is with you." So the burglar got out his flashlight and he shone it around, and he looked over in the corner, and there was a parrot in a cage. He said to his buddy, he says, "It's just a stupid parrot." And then he lowered the flashlight a little bit, and there was a Doberman Pinscher down there. And at that point, the parrot said, "Sick 'em, Lord." Now, let's relate that to where we are, okay? We know that there are burglars that are stealing our country. Okay? There are plenty of them. That's the Federal Reserve, it's Congress, it's this, there's the courts, and so on, right? But who's the parrot? Well, the parrot is the John Birch Society and other groups that are trying to alert the country to what's going on. Well, who's the Doberman? Ladies and gentlemen, that's you, right? You and people like you all across the country are the Dobermans who are going to stop the burglars, right? So there's my story. Now, we've heard some about inflation already today, and I wanted to tell you about what happened in Germany in the early 1920s when the German Reichsmark went from value, $1 would buy 180 Reichsmarks. In less than 3 years' time, it went up to 4 trillion. 4 trillion Reichsmarks for $1 US, right? Now, at that point, there was a fellow that had a wheelbarrow full of this currency, and he wheeled it down to the marketplace, and he tried to get it in the store. He wanted to get some food for his family, and he couldn't fit the thing in the store. He ran in and got the merchant, and he said, "Please come outside and tell me how much value I've got here. I need something." They got out on the sidewalk, and they found out somebody had dumped the money on the ground and stolen the wheelbarrow. Now, can it get that bad? Well, what we're seeing is a forcing of the United States into the long-planned New World Order. And it wasn't accomplished with the threat of communism, was it? Wars of national liberation didn't do it. Other routes haven't succeeded. But now our country faces an economic threat, one that is both very real and very dangerous. Could our nation be destroyed through debt and inflation? The answer, sad to relate, is yes. Yes. America could be brought to its knees economically, and the New World Order advocates running our government would happily rescue the nation by introducing a new money system and international control. And that would mean the end of hard-won independence. We often hear the word bankruptcy, even that our nation is bankrupt. It's not. Bankruptcy is the condition of not being able to borrow or raise money in some other way. Yes, the U.S. is borrowing, and who are we borrowing from? From China, from Japan, from Singapore, and elsewhere, putting our country's neck in another noose. Right? These leaders know that there's great wealth still held by the American people, by you Dobermans. Right? Wealth is confiscated through inflation. Independence is squandered through borrowing from foreign governments. And this is what is happening. America is being brought down, and the path to world government is being built through debt. Now, we all would be very surprised if there's anyone in the United States today who is unaware of the massive bailouts already accomplished and still being proposed. How great this transfer of wealth truly has become has been revealed only piecemeal. The nation was told about the $700 billion bailout approved by Congress in early October. Within days, that figure became $850 billion. Now, additional enormous amounts are being mentioned. They are both astounding and frightening. On November 24th, an economic columnist named Koporowski claimed that the Federal Reserve has promised to lend banks a total of more than $7.7 trillion. Bloomberg News reported the figure at $7.4 trillion. CNN added up the figures and came to $7.2 trillion. Reuters weighed in with a prediction that the potential bill for the U.S. financial rescue efforts is now $8.3 trillion. And Ron Paul recently offered in his December 3rd Straight Talk, the updated total bailout commitments add up to over $8 trillion. Now, with his legendary sound thinking and customary straightforwardness, Congressman Paul noted, this money does not come from some rainy day fund tucked away in the budget somewhere. It is created from thin air, and it devalues every dollar in circulation. That's straight thinking. In other words, it's fiat currency, an essentially worthless substance that has value attached to it by government edict, government fiat. If not restrained regarding how much will be issued, the fiat money creators will destroy all of its value. Are you ready for a $15 loaf of bread? How would you like a $100 fill-up at the gas tank? This is the way they're taking us. Now, history shows over and over again, and get this very clearly, if you give anyone the power to inflate, he will. If you give anyone the power to inflate the currency, he will. Now, though possibly by accident, even the New York Times revealed what was going on when in its lead article, and here it is, lead article in November 28th, just a few days ago, the first sentence in its lead article noted, and I quote, the Federal Reserve and Treasury announced that they would print as much money as needed to revive the nation's crippled banking system. They used the word print. Right? The fellow who did that is probably going to be fired. Right? But this is precisely what Ron Paul, our society, and many others have said throughout many years. What does inflation do to a country? Reports coming from inflation-plagued Zimbabwe recount what has already happened in that once thriving nation. Not too long ago, Zimbabwe was a pre-inflation food exporter. A recent letter sent by a distraught Zimbabwean to an American friend stated in part, and I'll read this from that letter. It said, "We are locked in a death grip and things are falling apart at a rapid pace. This morning I went shopping and this is what I saw. In one locally owned supermarket, which had branches all across the country, they are selling goods in Zimbabwe dollars. On the shelves they had light bulbs, cayenne pepper, a few vegetables which were distinctly past their best, and a few packets of meat which didn't look too safe. That's all. More than half of the supermarket is completely empty and closed off with strings of white plastic tape." That's what happened to a once thriving country because of inflation. Additional portions of this letter describe similar scenes in other food markets. What these people are experiencing could happen here. Our purpose is not to spread disillusionment, however. I don't believe that the unfathomable horror occurring in Zimbabwe will occur here. Before things ever got that bad, our leaders plan to introduce measures to save us by introducing new currency, possibly the euro or some other currency issued by the United Nations. This will amount to economic control, which is always followed by political control. Who would be responsible for this? The unregulated Federal Reserve that issues the currency, of course. But the guilt will be shared by the nearly irrelevant Congress that allows such power to remain in the Fed's grip. It's time to put an end to the Fed. I said that Congress is nearly irrelevant. It was 10 years ago that this article appeared in USA Today, and they're talking about the fact that there was going to be an impeachment trial and it might tie up the Senate. And Robert Reich, who had been a member of Clinton's cabinet, wrote this article and he said, trial ties up Senate, don't worry, Congress is irrelevant. And he talked about the fact of the Federal Reserve, and he talked about the fact that we go to war now without a declaration of war, and he talked about the federal government being dictated to by the International Monetary Fund and so on, right? Yes, Congress has become irrelevant, but it doesn't have to be. If you say end the Fed to fellow Americans, they will immediately ask you, what should replace it? That's like asking a man suffering from terminal cancer if he'd like to have terminal cholera or terminal heart disease, right? Robert Welch, the founder of the John Birch Society, once stated that there has never been honesty in the management of money in all history. That is so true. And so what we need is unmanaged money. We need real money, commodity money, such as gold and silver that don't have to be managed by government, by the Fed, or by some economic gurus. Unmanaged free marketplace will do the job. You know, you hear about all these economists, right? And I like to say, if you took all of these prominent economists and you laid them from end to end, that would be fine. What then do we recommend? There has to be a deluge of protests to every member of Congress. With rare exceptions, these elected officials have allowed this huge travesty to be perpetrated on the American people. Some in Congress will tell you that the action has to be taken, the bailouts, because certain banks and insurance companies and industry giants and so forth are too big to be allowed to fail. Don't fall for this. Don't fall for this. Saving these institutions would only be temporary, while the smaller firms on Main Street and taxpayers across the nation, like you Dobermans, right, will bear the immediate brunt of this unconscionable action. I can't recall who first said it, but what we're experiencing is reverse Robin Hood, right? You'll recall that Robin Hood stole from the rich to give to the poor. What's going on now is stealing from the poor and the middle class to give to the rich, right? And we ought to change his name around. It's not Robin Hood, it's Hood robbing, right? If nothing is done to stop these suicidal creators of fiat currency, and when the even huge beneficiaries of the freshly printed dollars begin again to fail, as they will, right, a frustrated and angry populace will demand that our leaders do something. Right? I remember Ron Paul one time said, it's not that government should do something, they should undo something. But when we ask our government to do something, they might very well invite dictatorial power for themselves and the loss of national sovereignty. One feature of a truly free enterprise system is that some ventures will fail. There will, of course, be many successes when freedom reigns and when you have good money. But there will always be failures. And in freedom, those who fail will likely start over again, and having learned from mistakes, will probably succeed. That's what freedom is all about. Failure is always present in a free society, even big failures. Ventures that fail should be allowed to fail. Nothing except freedom is so important that it can't fail. Now, Congress created the Federal Reserve in 1913. Therefore, Congress can abolish what it started. That's simple, isn't it? If it started it, it can end it. Doing so would begin the path back to real money, commodity money such as gold and silver. The previous speaker said what is needed is competition for the Fed. Competition always produces excellence. Monopoly produces just the opposite. So let's have competition for the Fed, and you might not even have to abolish it. It will simply go out of business, right? I have a DVD here that I've been happy to have produced. It's called Dollars and Cents. S-E-N-S-E, right? And it describes what we're talking about here, and we intend to have maybe a couple of 100,000 of them distributed around the United States. We're asking for you to help, right? You can pick one up there. If you go out the door here, go to the right, and you'll find the Birch Society booth in the corner there. It's in the right wing, I think. I think they did that. I think they did that deliberately. I think maybe they did that. I don't know. You'll also find a DVD of an overview of America that I've done, and the John Birch Society's surge. The year 2008 has been a very good year for us. We're on a surge. See, not only does the military have a surge over in Iraq, we have one too, right? That's a good word, and we'll continue to use it, right? So what do we want you to do? Well, we want you to plan your letters and your emails and your visits to members of Congress, right? You've got to get these guys to start doing it correctly. And if there's enough noise in a community, even the most left-wing congressman you can imagine who wants to get reelected will say, oh, okay, well, good, I'm going to start going down this path now instead of the one I've been going down. Now, out on that Birch booth out there, you'll find this, too, a sheet of paper, and it's a resolution. It's a resolution that we've written up, and we want you to take it and copy it and use it to send to your state legislatures, right? It goes through the whereases, lots of them. I won't read them all. And then it concludes, to help restore gold and silver money in accordance with the Constitution, then phasing out the Federal Reserve System and its inflationary paper money. And that's what's needed, right? And all of the details are right there. So you can get that too. Now, there are people who always come to me when I speak on this subject, and I usually speak for about an hour, and I'm not going to do that today. And they say to me, do you have your text? Can I find your text? So we printed up 19 pages of my text, and in this you'll also find pictures of the decline of the money system. You'll see a picture of an old gold certificate. You'll see a silver certificate. You'll see the Federal Reserve that first started saying redeemable in gold. Right? And then you'll see how it deteriorated through the Roosevelt administration, and then we got taken off silver by the Johnson administration in 1968. And now we're down to fiat money, the amount of which, the value of which, the interest rates on which are set by a private agency that is not even part of the government. It's called the Federal Reserve. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been taken for a ride, and it's time to get off the ride, and it's time to get back on to the Constitution of the United States and to good, solid, honest money. So I recommend several things, but I'll close by recommending what the great St. Augustine always said. He said to pray as if it all depends on God, and work as if it all depends on you, and do them both at the same time. Thank you very much. Thank you.